Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vik, and I want to thank you for listening. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. We are back in studio today. Sheriff Wagner and Chief Deputy Houchin in the house as usual. Thanks for being here, guys.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, happy Memorial Day weekend. It's a 3-dayer.
Yeah, and you know we'll see what the weekend brings, but hopefully quieter weather and quieter activity. Maybe.
Yeah, especially Iowa's been getting smacked so hard. I'm sure they're ready for a break over there.
Well, somebody else who's probably ready for a quieter Memorial Day weekend is our guest today, Cody Thomas from the Nebraska State Patrol. Cody, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, we've been meaning to do this for a while, and I'm glad that it finally came together. So looking forward to having you on.
I am down for a quieter weekend.
Yeah, and we probably just jinxed the crap out of ourselves.
I don't believe in the Q word jinx or anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, I will say quiet plenty of times.
Okay.
Because last night we literally had storms run the entire length of the state.
Yes.
So I mean, we are due for a couple quiet nights.
Yeah, it was a on the radar. It looked like a squeegee across the entire state of Nebraska. So the farmers are probably happy, at least for the ones that didn't get hailed on. So we'll talk today about law enforcement communication, and that's a big reason why we have you in today. We'll explain why in a little bit. But before we get into all of that stuff, for people that don't know you or maybe haven't heard you either in your current capacity or in a previous one, help us understand where are you from, and how did Cody Thomas become Cody Thomas?
Well, that's a story that I don't think we should tell on microphones. So I grew up in Hastings through 6th grade.
Okay.
Most of my dad's family's from Hastings. My mom's family moved around a ton with my grandpa, and then they started in Nebraska, and then she eventually came back to Nebraska. So mom and dad were at Hastings College, and so that's where I grew up for the first 6 grades of my life. And
All right.
Then we moved to Omaha, but like literally off of Dodge. So Hastings has Highway 6, maybe about 3 miles south of our house, and then Dodge is Highway 6, like not even a quarter mile from my house. And then looking for a home in Lincoln, I was scared to leave Highway 6. So we're
stuck right there.
Yeah, I mean, the furthest away from Highway 6 I've ever lived was 10 months in Fairbury, which is about, 30 miles south of 6. So
Yeah.
I have never lived outside the state of Nebraska, but I've lived in several communities within Nebraska.
Well, that's awesome. So where did you go to college then?
UNL.
Okay.
Yep. I went to the College of Journalism there. And so I grew up around radio because my grandpa was Lloyd Thomas. If you say that name in Hastings, people still remember him. He was on TV from the 60s to the 90s. He was on radio starting in the late 40s.
Okay.
Then left radio for a little bit to do TV. Then he came back and did both. And his last broadcast was right around the time that I was in college. So
Oh, wow.
we had a brief overlap in our broadcasting careers.
Nice.
Which is pretty cool. But he was on the air for more than 50 years.
Really?
So I grew up around broadcasting. I remember going to the radio station KHAS in Hastings.
Okay.
And he had a Sunday evening big band program. So I went in there and I said goodnight to Grandma and all my friends every Sunday night. You know, when it was the summer, usually it was kind of late. So during the school year, then Mom wouldn't let me go. But Dad was there every Sunday night, and I went a whole bunch. So I grew up around radio. And so when it was time to pick a career, that's where I kind of gravitated, was broadcasting.
So that's what you were kind of had in mind going into school then. And
Yep.
then that's what you got your degree in?
Yep. So broadcasting major. The journalism school is a little different now than it was then. Had the sports marketing program existed then, I absolutely would have done that.
Okay.
But I still got to do a ton of Husker basketball. baseball games. That's back when the Husker baseball team was in the College World Series a couple times.
Yep.
So I got to do a game at Rosenblatt, which was awesome, on the student radio station. So I really loved the sports aspect of that, and that's what I did straight out of school at KUTT in Fairbury. Was doing high school football and basketball, and any game they would let me broadcast, I would. And then I came back up to Lincoln after a year and started working at KLIN here in town.
I've tried to talk like just in my own head, like if I were going to broadcast like a game that I'm watching on TV, and it's super hard to do. I don't know, and maybe you just pick it up over time.
Yeah,
but
I think it's just practice.
Okay.
But I don't know if I got back in the booth right now, how good I'd do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe it's like riding a bike. Maybe it just come back.
I suppose.
So were you in sports too on top of that, or just had
Not well enough to play a lot. Like I played baseball and basketball were my sports growing up. And I kind of fizzled out around high school when the talent gap, I suppose, got to a point where I couldn't fake it anymore. I was a really good practice player, good team, like locker room guy. I was really encouraging for the people who played. But I had a blast with it. I love coaching my kids now. They're both playing basketball and baseball, softball. So we've got a busy summer with baseball and softball. So the limited knowledge that I do have, I'm using now. But at some point, they will graduate from what I'm able to teach. So we'll get into like middle school or high school coaches at some point.
Perfect. Did you stay in radio then, mostly career-wise, straight out of college? Was that okay?
Yep. So I worked for a year in Fairbury at KUTT, and did sports down there. Then came back to Lincoln for KLIN. I was there for 10 years.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of sports at KLIN, not a ton, but a little bit. Mostly news.
Yeah.
I was on the afternoon show with Kobe Mack on Drive Time Lincoln for a few years, and then Kobe went on to different things, and then I took over the show and hosted for, 4 or 5 years, and then moved to the morning show for probably about a year before it was time for a change.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I knew you before you were in your current role, was listening to you on KLIN. So a lot of different types of formats and shows, but got to work with a lot of cool people, and I'm sure interview a lot of cool people.
Oh yeah,
too.
Definitely. I think my grandpa and I, and there's no way of verifying this, but I think my grandpa and I are probably the only grandfather-grandson pair who has interviewed Tom Osborne.
Oh.
Because he interviewed Coach when he was in high school back in Hastings. My grandpa was doing sports stuff back then. So in the 50s, when Coach Osborne was going through Hastings High, my grandpa talked to him several times, and then I interviewed him as athletic director at UNL. So, I mean, tons of strange voices like Sheriff Wagner, and I'm just kidding. Governors, mayors. I mean, the senators, things like that. Presidential candidates we had on the air. Those were kind of the rare ones that were really cool. But I think just making those connections with the local people, like the sheriff. I think those are the most valuable, just to know those people, so you have that level of connection. And so kind of in my current position, I've tried to be that just on the other side. I want to be that level of connection for our current media members who are trying to tell their stories.
So that's exactly what you do now for the State Patrol, in many shapes and forms. But what was it that drew you out of that traditional communications kind of career and into the public safety sphere?
I have had just a tremendous amount of respect for people who wear the uniform, both law enforcement. My brother's a firefighter in Kansas City, and military is very much in my family's history, mostly Navy, but my grandpa was in the Army Air Corps before the Air Force existed. My other grandpa was in the Navy, served in the Pacific in World War II. And so we've had a ton of family just go through the line of service. Career-wise, that was never something that kind of jumped out at me. I felt like my career path was kind of set pretty early on, and I went in that direction. But just the idea of service was important to me. And when I started thinking maybe there's something else out there for me, the State Patrol had this job ready. And it was literally like 5 days from the time where I thought, oh, maybe I should try something else, to, oh, hey, you want to do this? And so it was really cool that I get to serve kind of in my own way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily wearing a uniform, but I get to support the people who are doing the job.
So what year was that you made the move to the Nebraska State Patrol?
2017. So I've been there about 7 years now.
Okay. Time flies when you're having fun.
It has been a lot of fun these last 7 years, definitely.
Has it, looking back on it now 7 years later, has it been what you expected it to be? Maybe, some of both?
So I don't know how much you want to go into 2017, but 2017 was an interesting year for the patrol. The Friday of my 5th week was the day that the colonel was fired. And so I was about a month into the job, essentially kind of without a boss, because there was so much going on. We had a couple majors who were very quickly promoted to those leadership roles where they needed to watch over the entire agency, and they kind of said, hey, you can do this, right? I said, yeah, let's go. So I got to define very early on. I got to define what I wanted the position to be. So we really ramped up social media. We ramped up what we were doing, like video and things like that. Stuff that I had done in college, but hadn't really flexed those video production muscles for more than a decade. So I really got back into that, and that was a lot of fun, kind of teaching myself again how to do it. The programs have changed a little bit. We're not like splicing tape or anything like that anymore, but I did learn how to do that in college. So if we had to do that, but everything computerized, all the programs now, similar to what I learned on. So that was like riding a bike, just getting back into it. And so I kind of got to define what I wanted the communications management attitude for the patrol to be. And then I had a bunch of media connections already because I had been in media, so I knew all of the players, especially here in Lincoln. I knew everybody. I knew most of the Omaha people. And then it was a process of meeting the people from the other states or the other parts of the state. So with the patrol, really with Nebraska, I think we have about 7 media markets. And I can't consider media markets towns with TV stations, but there's also dozens of radio stations across the state. And then you go to newspapers where we've got, I couldn't even guess how many weeklies there are across the state of Nebraska. It's probably over 100. So there are so many different areas of the state that produce news. It was just a process of meeting as many of those people as I could. And it's an ongoing process. There are still new people I need to meet.
So what is your official title?
Public Relations Director.
Okay.
So when you first got there, you kind of had a firestorm you had to deal with.
Yeah, there was a lot, and I didn't have any PR experience other than watching other people do it.
Yeah.
I knew Deb. Deb Collins was my predecessor. She went on to the Public Service Commission. And the patrol has kind of been interesting. And then before Deb, it was Terry Tiber, who they had both worked at 1011.
Yes.
And then Terry went on, and I think was in Senator Johan's office in D.C., and then Deb went to the Public Service Commission. So the patrol, going back to at least the late 90s, has always had a civilian in this position, which I think there's certainly value to having. I like it that way because it's a position for me. But
that makes sense, right?
But you three have skill sets that I don't possess. You have training that I don't possess, but I have training that you don't. And so I think that it really works. As long as we're willing to work alongside each other. And I found that most of the troopers across the state love that cohesive relationship where I can do things that'll help you. You're doing things that'll help my mission too. And we're all working toward that same goal of keeping the state safe. So,
Do you find like a lot of troopers, because I see that with our personnel, that they're just absolutely terrified to talk to the media and do some of these things because I don't know what the stigma is, but they are certainly, oh, I don't want to do that.
Oh yeah, totally. And I try to get that out of them before they leave the academy. So I'm really present at our training academy in Grand Island. It's a 22-week program. They get a couple weeks off in there, so we say 24 overall. But I'm probably out and back to Grand Island maybe 16 or 17 times during that time. Wow. So they see me constantly. And that's part of just building that relationship. So once they're out on the road and I need a picture from them or something like that, or if something happens to them, they know that I'm the voice they can trust. They already know who I am. It's not some stranger in Lincoln who's at the head shed that they've got to call and they don't know. So I want everyone to know me before they get out on the road. I also put a camera in their face a ton of times. We practice interviews. And it's not necessarily stuff that they'll have to talk about if they ever do interviews with media out on the road, but they're talking about themselves. We do recruiting stuff for them. Why are they there? Why do they want to be a trooper? Things like that. And then we do throw some scenarios at them when I teach a class out there. But yeah, I definitely get that from some of the people, and some of the people, they gravitate toward it. They're okay in front of camera. Others, they're not. And for those people, I remind them, you are literally wearing a camera your entire shift. You're being recorded constantly.
Right.
And so you're thinking about those things. And I understand standing in front of a camera can be intimidating. It's not a skill that everybody has. But for those who want to do it and are open to it, I want to equip them with the training to make that happen.
Well, sometimes you just don't have a choice. You're in.
That's true.
And it's going to happen.
Well, especially with the patrol, where a lot of times our troopers are the only person within 20 miles of an incident when it happens. And whether it's just a crash or a critical incident or something like that, they have to be the voice on the scene. And so the first message I give to them is, do your job first. Media will understand that you've got to do that first. And then if you need help, call me. If you can handle it, you're equipped to do it.
So we've talked a lot about that sworn versus civilian PIO type of thing, and you make some very good points there.
Well, one of the things that impressed me just watching you from afar was how quick you were able to pick up on like the mission and the culture piece, because there's so much of what we do that's kind of, I mean, Sheriff, you talk about the jargon sometimes, and there's certain ways that cops talk, I guess.
Yeah.
And not everybody picks up on that. And some people it's kind of forced, but for you it seemed really natural. And I don't know how much work you had to put into it. You made it look easier maybe than.
I appreciate that. But one of the things in 2017, as I was kind of thrust into this find out for yourself situation, was I decided I'm going to find out. Mm-hmm. So I got in a ton of cars that year. I rode along with everybody who would let me in their vehicle. And some of it was, to take video and get photos and stuff like that. But a lot of it was just learning. Mm-hmm. And I wanted the field to understand that we were going through some stuff at the time. It wasn't super pleasant as an agency. But I didn't want to be that stranger in Lincoln who was just trying to deal with all of this and be a stranger. So I wanted them to know who I was. So I've kind of been able to refine that now with as active as I am at the training academy. But in 2017, I was around the state constantly, meeting people, putting names to faces, and letting them know what I was all about too. So yeah, I picked up on some of the jargon. There's still some of it that I probably can't get into, the same headspace that the troopers are, other law enforcement officers.
You're probably lucky not to do that.
but I think they at least understand that I get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to those scenes and see the things they do and experience the things they do. And I understand that that's a part of it that I'll never get. But I think they understand that I've kind of put that effort forward to understand as much as I can. And so we have a good relationship all across the state, I think, with what we've got going in the PIO office and all our troopers in the field.
Well, it definitely looks like it's paid dividends for you. So kudos to you. Have they given you a hat yet? Speaking of headspace.
No, I have a plastic hat.
A plastic hat.
Yeah,
okay.
we give
plastic
these
trooper hat.
Yes, we give these away to kids at the state fair.
Okay.
I think last year we maybe gave like 10,000 of these hats away. And the first year we did it, maybe 3 or 4 years. The first year we did it, our thought was, the state fair board, after we do this, is going to be like, no, never again, because there'll be 10,000 hats flying around in the wind, because these things are light as anything. So like all these things flying around the fairgrounds. But no, they loved it. The kids love it. So we still do it. And I have one of those. I do not have a straw or official felt hat.
Okay. Well, probably still time.
I do have.
You got to earn those though. I haven't earned it.
Okay.
So.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
Sometimes us in law enforcement have gotten black eyes in doing that. So with some of the incidents that have occurred over your 7 years there that haven't been always a shining light, how do you go about dealing with those in your position, and how do you make it go as smooth as you possibly can?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I want to know as much information about it as quickly as possible, whether it's an officer-involved shooting or some employee doing something they shouldn't. I just want to gather the information. I can't communicate what I don't know. And I think that's part of the trust aspect that we've really worked to build, that we can trust each other with information, and then whatever we are able to put out to the public and the media, we'll do that. And there's a very high profile situation in 2021 where we had to deal with an employee who broke the law. Yes. And it was a black eye, obviously. It was terrible. But this was an employee who broke our trust. We had put a bunch of trust in this person. As quickly as we could communicate what we knew was going on without compromising the ongoing investigation that was still going on, there was a task force looking into that at that time. So we were kind of limited to what we could say. We just tried to be transparent. I know the public may want all of the details as soon as they're available, and helping them understand that there is an ongoing process to the investigation. And if we give out information prior to the investigation being ready, for the county attorney being ready for that to come out, that may actually jeopardize a prosecution. And that's the last thing we want to do. Whether it's a case we're investigating or if somebody's investigating us or anything like that, we don't want to do anything that would jeopardize the prosecution and get in the way of justice. Those situations can be difficult to handle, but I think we've built a lot of trust within our media here in Nebraska that they know I'm going to be as transparent as we absolutely can, and we'll follow up.
Yeah, I think the sheriff always said, there's no good way to eat a crappy sandwich. You just got to take it, eat it all at once, and get it over with at that point in time. But yeah, I think the public does mandate that law enforcement's more transparent in this day and age, and there's no doubt about it. But again, being able to say, hey, this is why we can't, and a lot of times if you explain it, they'll buy it. But if you just say no comment, and that used to be the big thing law enforcement did, and everybody's, media will go find the story if you're not willing to say anything.
Yeah, and I think body cam footage and dash cam footage is a big thing here in Nebraska, based on the statutory requirements for a grand jury case, that we can't just throw all that out there. And they see other police agencies around the country saying, here it is. And I know agencies whose PIOs that I know really well, Evansville, Indiana, they will release the video of an officer-involved shooting within 24 hours. Like, it is lightning quick. Wow. And they've gotten that to almost, I don't know how many they have a year, but it's usually more than we have here in Nebraska, I would say, just from that community in Indiana. But they've gotten that down to a system that's what the public expects, so that's what they do. So when the public sees that, or other agencies putting information out, sometimes we have to explain that by statute, we can't do that here in Nebraska. Yeah. The grand jury process is different here. Every state has different laws. And so part of the education is the public, but the other part of it is setting the expectations for our media partners too. That I wish we could. We can't. There are some, so we'll do as much as we can. We'll let you know when the grand jury process is complete, or when it's out of our hands and over to the county attorney, whatever that is, and we'll be as transparent about the process as we can. But there are some things by statute we just can't get into.
I was looking up this quote just to kind of get your thoughts on it, because I think you guys are doing some of the same things that we're trying to do on, yes, we have to be transparent. Yes, we have to explain maybe the context behind why we can do something, why we can't do something. But this was actually from an agency in Canada, and Inspector Dave Springer said, if we, being the police, do not tell our story, others will write the narrative for us. And do you think that that's true in public safety and law enforcement?
Yeah.
Coming maybe from your, seeing it on the other side?
Yeah, I think so. And because there are so many different avenues for people to tell stories now, right? And so whether that's someone with taking video of a situation or anything like that, or just rumors happening. I remember one specific case, this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where we had it was maybe 30 seconds long pursuit in Grand Island, literally around the Fauner Park parking lot. It was Christmas Eve, 9 or 10 o'clock, something like that. We had gotten home from church already, and so now I'm getting the calls about this thing happening. And what ended up happening is the guy that we were pursuing ends up driving into a dead end at the parking lot, gets out and unfortunately chooses at that time to shoot himself. On social media, within about 30 minutes, somebody's saying, I just saw the State Patrol shoot a guy. And our officer was not in a physical position to where he could have even done that. So, and through what we had with body cam, dash cam, I knew that right away. And so part of that situation was not necessarily going out and combating that narrative, because it was a small account. It was one person. It wasn't getting any traction, but helping the media understand right away and using their microphone and their voice to say, here's what actually happened. And so it's not, you don't want to play like whack-a-mole and hit all the rumors down. You'll spend your entire life doing that. It's unendingly frustrating. Yeah. But use the partnerships that we've created. The media in that situation in the Tri-Cities area, they know me. I knew that there would be at least some of them working on Christmas Eve. And so we got that information out, said, I will provide more when I've got it, but here's what I know right now. It wasn't an officer-involved shooting. It was a situation in which a man unfortunately took his own life. We're investigating and kind of went with it like that. So, yeah, I think if you don't tell your story, others will.
I think that's been something that we've, just when I say we, in law enforcement in general, we've done a poor job with, or at least struggled with, because it's not part of our primary
just like
thing.
Cody was talking about, not wanting to jeopardize the investigation, limitations by statute on what we can and can't say.
We're very conditioned to that.
Yeah, so we are overcautious about releasing information, but it is. I think you're right. It's why we need to establish a good working relationship with our local media partners. Sometimes you can give them the backstory, and they're not going to run with that, but they can help get the facts out that are existing. So, yeah,
that's part of the reason that we started this show. And when we do social media stuff, we do media briefings. Obviously, we do traditional things that law enforcement agencies have done. But part of the reason we did this was to try and give another outlet to that story and be able to tell our story with some context and things. So it's
we control it.
Yeah, and we can message directly to our audience, I guess. So
when you're on TV, on the nightly news and things, you got about 10 seconds of a blip of what you're saying at that point in time. And, at least this way, and we started Facebooking live our press conferences and doing that. And that helps us get the whole story out, even though, and I understand why they can't do that because, they get the time limits and things, but I'm just glad we don't have a media here that's really out to get us. There's other jurisdictions around the country that there's a lot of friction, for the lack of a better word, between agencies and them. And they're always just, if they get a chance, they're going to drill them.
And unfortunately, sometimes those agencies have earned it a little bit.
Well,
So that's, so part of it is having a good communications game, but part of it is, just hopefully being a good agency, because it's much easier to communicate that.
I want, and to the partnerships with local media, they all have my cell phone number. I can think of an example today that I can't imagine is going to actually be a news story or anything like that, but it's just that NTV in Kearney just sent me a text. Hey, semi-fire near Gothenburg. Well, let me look. It was a straight truck caught on fire. Wasn't in the roadway, wasn't a crash or anything like that. This is the time of year when that happens. It'll happen 4 or 5 times every month. Yeah, absolutely. Here's what's going on. We're running our rolling roadblocks in that area. The sheriff's office is helping out from the west, and I think we should be good here in the next couple hours or so. Simple stuff like that. It doesn't turn into a news story, but they know that they can ask. I'll get text messages, I'll get emails from media partners and just asking questions. And if I know something about it, I'll share it. If I can't, if I don't, then I'll find out who's actually in charge. If it's the sheriff's office, I'll send them to you guys. But just try to help them out because they're doing a job too. I've done that job. I know that's a 24-hour-a-day job for a lot of people, and it is a hard job to do, especially right now, differentiating trust in national media and local media. I really want people to trust our local media because they live here. They're part of this community. They're entrenched in it, and it's not the same as national media.
We need them almost as much as they need us.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We need local media's help all the time. And, one of the media courses that I took years ago said, if you have a big event, everybody's wowed by the big three anchors and their big trucks and stuff. But, if you've established a relationship with your local media, pay attention to them and let them be the feed to the big networks because they're the people that live where you live, and you'll see them the next day where you won't see that satellite truck the next day.
Yep. Quadruple homicide that we had in Laurel a couple summers ago. It's still ongoing, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But from the media aspect, I was in Grand Island that morning, learned about it. So then I'm heading up to Laurel, which is probably about a 4-hour drive. And during that drive, I get calls from CNN, the New York Times. They all are hearing that something crazy has happened in Laurel. And so, I'm not going to give you any information that I'm not going to give to our locals. I don't have the information yet. When I get there, we're going to figure out a news conference and things like that. But we didn't just set up a news conference within 10 minutes of getting there and then spray the feed out. We gave our local media time to get there. So we announced that we're going to do this news conference, gave them a couple hours so that folks from the Sioux City area, folks from Omaha, folks from Lincoln, Norfolk could get up to Laurel because that's a little bit of a haul for some people. Sioux City's the closest, but it's still a half-hour drive. And then that was a big news conference. We did it right outside, and as soon as it was over, I don't think I ever heard from CNN or the New York Times or ABC again. But our local media have kept up on because they're the ones following that case. And so they're the first question. They're the next question. They're the next question. Like if you're calling on people, call on the people don't call on the people who fly in and will fly out immediately. Yeah. And I love that you have that perspective, Sheriff.
So when you hear about a Uvalde or one of the huge news stories around the nation, do you put yourself in those shoes and say, what would I do? What could I do that might have been a little bit better here? Or do you do
absolutely.
Evaluation of that?
Yep, absolutely. And I know one of the PIOs with the Texas DPS who is heavily involved in Uvalde in the first couple news conferences they had. And I think that was a situation where information, like I said earlier, I want to have as much information as possible. The first time they went out to the cameras, they didn't have nearly all of the information. And so they kept having to correct what was said. And when you're doing that, then all of the after action reports that come back and say, well, they didn't go on fast enough. They didn't do this right. They didn't do this right. You look as though then you're covering up something. Right. And I don't think that was the case initially. I think that was they genuinely didn't know because they probably had conflicting stories, but they felt like they had to say something right away before having the information. And so I think they've learned from that. I think I'm in a group of PIOs through the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, that we've done case studies on that incident, on the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has done case studies on that and how they dealt with that situation. There was a manhunt, I'm forgetting who it was for, in New York State, where we had the New York State Police, their PIOs, did a case study.
The escaped inmates that was doing that?
Yeah, and so they ended up finding it, and just we learned from each other. And I think the goal is for all of law enforcement to communicate better as a whole, because I think as we'd all agree, a black eye for law enforcement from an agency thousands of miles away can have an impact here. It has an impact on the public opinion here, whether or not it has anything to do with our agencies. So if we're all kind of floating the boats higher by communicating better, I think that helps all officers around the country.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Well, those major events that end up occurring, and I'm sure you have learned, 40% of the information that's coming out right away is wrong in these major incidents and active shooters and things like that. And it really takes a while to get a grasp of exactly what you got going on.
Yeah, which is why you've got to be, before that happens, present. You can't show up at the moment of critical incident, and that's the first time you're using social media in a month. We are ever present on social media with the patrol. I look back through our post calendar, and I think we posted something every day for each of the last 3 or 4 years, like every single day. Most of the time it's 2 or 3 things a day, just because we want to. That's how the algorithm works. Mm-hmm. The more active you are, the more likely you are to be boosted into more of your followers. And so as we continue to build our audiences, if we shy away, then we've got an Amber Alert or something like that, information that we have to get out right away. And now we have lost some of our audience because we've been quiet for a week. So before the information that you absolutely have to get out, you got to be communicating before that.
Oh, and I think a lot of that things too is like, who is the lead agency? And so you're not getting out mixed messages from one agency to the other. And I know on several instances, you guys were the one, and we'd push out whatever you guys had to our audience in catching things that maybe individuals that aren't following you but are following us. And I think it is so important that people in your profession know each other from all these agencies around.
Yeah, and I think in Nebraska, we've got a growing group of PIOs. If you go east, every agency has a dedicated PIO. It's really interesting how kind of the Midwest has not really had that position. And I wonder if that's just based on the number of media outlets. Media are all over the place in the East Coast. And it's just something that's always been the case. So we've got a growing group of PIOs here. And so as more people come on board, I want to continue to grow that locally just so we know each other. We can help each other out because when a critical incident happens, you can't do it by yourself. I could not have done what we needed to communicate in Laurel by myself. I leaned on a couple other people. The tornadoes a couple weeks ago. I know you guys had a situation in Lancaster County. Douglas County had a situation. Washington County had a situation. There was a good group of PIOs that were at least communicating. Whether or not we were changing what was going on, we at least knew that group was there. We could support each other. When the National Guard needed a little bit of help communicating, I stepped in and I helped in that way. So just knowing who the players are, knowing who the communicators are is such a big deal.
Hey, I'm Captain John Vik with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. When it comes to your career, don't settle for good enough. Don't settle for ordinary. We won't either. Be different, be better, be exceptional. Start your future today at joinlso.com. Well, I hope, you mentioned Facebook and social media a little bit, and I don't want to give away too many of your secret sauce recipe secrets, but, whether people realize it by looking at your social media or not, you have some very strategic goals.
Yeah.
They're some that I actually stole, and I texted back to you from a class that I took from you. But so help our listeners understand kind of what you're looking for when you're thinking, yeah, that's great if I make a post every day, but your posts aren't just dancing cats, and you're very strategic about
dancing cats.
Well,
we've never had a dancing cat.
You've never had a dancing cat?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not on our page. But so I'm going to go super cloud level.
Yes.
We've been talking about telling your story. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between story and stories.
Yes.
Our story at the Nebraska State Patrol is very simple. Keep Nebraska safe. Mm-hmm. Everything that we communicate is in, whether it's the Make It Click campaign, whether it's a sunset with a cruiser, no matter what it is, Our goal as an agency is to keep Nebraska safe. And so that's our story. And everything we do on social media is in line with that, whether we're highlighting one of our civilian teammates, our professional staff, or we're talking about an arrest that one of our troopers made or something like that. So then all of the individual stories that go under that story, they have to fall in line with that. And so, yeah, I in 2017, I came up to some goals that are more reminders for me than anything about what I want our communication to be about. And that's officer safety, public safety. Those are A1, A2 in no particular order. I mean, those are the most important things. If what we're doing on social media hampers either of those efforts, it's not worth putting on social media. I want our community to trust what we're doing as an agency. And in 2017, that was damaged based on what the patrol was going through. So it was really important for me to help build that up. Increasing our visibility. I want people to understand more of what we're doing. Even if we can't talk about tactics and things like that, understand that our troopers are trained to do this and go into these situations. And that's why I'm so active at our training academy. I want people to know some of the training that our people go through, and then recruiting. So those are the 5 goals that kind of fall under the overall Keep Nebraska Safe mission of our social media. Yeah. I view every post that we do as a recruiting post, because it's increasing the visibility of the patrol. I don't know any law enforcement agency right now that wouldn't raise their hand if you ask if they're hiring. So there's, and not that I'm trying to steal anybody who's maybe coming to the sheriff's office or anything, but I think that's another one of those areas where a rising tide lifts all boats. Like if law enforcement and the police departments of our state have those positive images out there, I think that helps everybody. So I've been encouraged to hear, like NLETC, I know this camp that's out there right now is full, right? I think they've maxed out the number of people. That's great. That means people are going into law enforcement, and that's a good problem to have, is to need more spots in that camp. Will that benefit the patrol directly since we run our own camp? Not in terms of numbers, but in terms of partnership, absolutely.
It does. I just talked with the colonel about that, because on those agencies in the western part of the state, perhaps, if they're shorthanded, then the burden falls upon the patrol.
Yes.
And that's where it's incumbent upon us to be fully staffed so that it's not, a burden on the state patrol.
So it doesn't raise our numbers, but it raises the numbers out there.
Yep.
And that's those partnerships are so vital. Because as you said, Sheriff, in western Nebraska, we may have 5 or 6 troopers working at any given time over, I don't even know how many thousands of square miles the Panhandle is. But tornadoes last night in the Ogallala area, we have people running that way from Broken Bow. I mean, just all hands on deck in those situations. If there are more deputies, officers out there working, they can get there sooner. So I think every social media post has to be a positive recruiting message, one way or another, showing off what we're doing with the job or the community involvement and things like that.
Well, I think when you said lift all the boats, what's good for you guys is good for us. It's good for Papillion. It's good for Alliance. And there was a time when law enforcement, I mean, we're getting, I think it feels like we're swinging back. But there was a time when I think a lot of people were having conversations with their kids, with their families of, are you sure law enforcement's really what you want to get into? I think even if you talk to a lot of law enforcement officers, would you want your kids to follow you into this career? People had a little gut check moment to that. So I think being able, back to that story, being able to tell that story, why this career is important, how this career does keep Nebraska safe, does keep all of our individual state and local communities safe, it helps all of us.
Yeah, I think just finding the mission-focused person who has a heart of service, who is willing to be dedicated to a cause. I mean, it's not necessarily that they're willing to be dedicated to this cause, but a cause. And if we put this noble cause in front of them, I can do that. I can serve. I can help keep Nebraska safe. I think that's the type of person that we're looking for. Man, woman, doesn't come from any specific background. But I think as law enforcement agencies, we're trying to find people who just want to help. And at the end of the day, I think that's, as from the outside looking in, what I have always viewed the police as, are first and foremost helpers.
So if someone wants to be a helper for the Nebraska State Patrol, where can they go to find more information?
NebraskaTroopers.com is our website.
Well, how about Lancaster County? No, okay, sorry.
Sheriff, you're going to plug this every time you do a podcast.
I sneak in the commercials in between, so I'll just cut it out.
Yeah,
It's
so
fine.
and NebraskaTroopers.com. And, I'll just maybe go into just a brief little bit about what we're doing with that website. It's mostly just featuring people. Different careers, like, whether it's bomb squad or investigator or drone pilot or, aviation, stuff like that. All of those different career paths are available within the patrol. But what we've found recruiting wise is that the better the connection is a person has with the agency, the more likely they are to actually not just apply, but follow through on that application. Because I know you guys can probably attest, not every applicant shows up for testing.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we want the people to have a little bit of that intestinal fortitude to not only get over the first hurdle, but take on the next hurdle and the next after that. And so we're trying to connect people with our troopers. We've got people from all over the state who have signed on to be recruiters. So when we get somebody who has some interest, we'll connect them with a trooper right away. They can talk about their job, their career, how they got there, their background, anything like that. And then they've all gone through the camp experience. I haven't gone through the camp experience. I can't tell them all of the ins and outs of that. I've seen a lot of it, but I haven't seen all of it. So I can't detail that. So I'm trying to put prospective candidates in connection with troopers as quickly as possible. And hopefully that turns into maybe not this camp, maybe the next camp, maybe the camp after that turns into them actually saying, yep, that's for me. That's the career I want.
Well, I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh my gosh, and it's overwhelming because from the time you start to the time you're actually on the road by yourself, it's a year.
Yeah.
And that can be intimidating to folks, but having somebody, like you said, that be able to talk you through it, and I made it,
Yeah.
I'm an example. You can do this. So I think that's a good idea. I like that.
Well, before we let you get out of here today, I do want to talk just about your team a little bit back at the Nebraska State Patrol, because although you brought your bass drum and your tambourine and your trombone with you today, the one-man band that you're not just a one-man band. You've got some other people that are helping you out. So what does your team look like at the State Patrol now?
Okay, you'll have to indulge me because we have 700 people on my team. The entire agency. Like that's literally, that's our sworn staff, our professional staff. Everybody knows what I'm doing. I've given presentations to, literally in the last 2 or 3 months, I've traveled the state and talked to every one of our teammates. They know what we're doing. They know what our goals are. They know how we measure our goals. They know the metrics. I guess to go back to something we were talking about earlier with just social media and media consumption, like they know that we reached 73 million people with our social media posts last year. They know that our traditional media stories that our media partners across the state wrote that involved the State Patrol reached 1.6 billion people. So those metrics, I share that. We want communication to be as open internally as it is externally. And that's something that I learned probably 2 or 3 years ago, that we probably weren't doing a good enough job communicating internally when news releases that I was sending out to the public weren't going to our staff. It's just a simple thing. So now everything I send goes out to everyone in the agency. And so we have a great buy-in from the whole team. Everybody knows, they know where my phone number is if they don't know my phone number directly. And so I think that's been a really cool thing is I'll get texts of, okay, so a couple weeks ago with the Northern Lights, I can't tell you how many text messages I got from troopers taking pictures of either of their car or of the Northern Lights. I mean, that's awesome. That's because of the relationships we've created. They understand the value of those photos. They understand why we put them on social media, and they want to be a part of that. So I would say we have everyone in the agencies on the team. Michaela Hall is my number 2. So she's new. She's pretty, maybe about 4 or 5 months into the job now. She's going through a lot of the stuff that I went through in 2017, where she's going out there and meeting people. She's doing ride-alongs. She's out at the training academy constantly. She's trying to understand. She comes from a civilian background too. So she's trying to understand the things that make up the patrol. And so once we get into a little bit more of a rhythm between the two of us, I think the sky's the limit with what we can do with our communications.
That's a really good answer.
You weren't ready for that one,
John
were you?
Bolduc, you hear that? That was a really good answer.
But it's true. Like we have troopers who are on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, all across the state. We have people who send stuff in. And if they get a media question directly, they know they can ask me. If I've got, through our mock system, I can see where any of them are. And if I know one of them's in a place I want a picture of that day, hey, when you got 5 minutes, stop and just give me a picture of your car in the sun because it's hot and I want people to make sure that they're checking their back seat to make sure the kids are out, stuff like that. They understand why we do those things.
To somebody that's looking at this saying, well, gosh, we're government's spending all this money. Is it really worth, are we really getting the bang for our buck with all these communications and social media stuff? What would you say to the person that's skeptical about whether or not we need positions like yours in law enforcement?
Well, social media is free. We don't pay for anything. We've paid for a little bit of recruiting, marketing, not much, a little bit. We use grant dollars from the Highway Safety Office to help with some PSAs and things like that, whether it's seatbelt safety, distracted driving. We got some stuff like that running throughout the state using the Nebraska Broadcasters Association, which they literally touch every corner of the state. So I coming from where I was in news, I was so focused on government spending and things like that. So I come into this role and it's not like my attitude has changed. I'm very fastidious with what little dollars we have.
Yeah.
Like I as a taxpayer don't want to overspend with what we're doing. So
certainly,
that's something that's top of mind for me. But I think the value of communication can't be overstated. Like even if there are some agencies that have 10 PIOs, there's some agencies that probably like Chicago PD, I would bet probably has a team of like 50 PIOs. And I think communication is critically important. If it's one person or 50 people doing that communication, as long as you're communicating with the public and telling your story, I think that's super valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it probably helps keep the public safer. That's the end goal, is if we can do something to improve or maintain the already safe environment that we have here in Nebraska. If a social media post helps a parent check the back seat and prevents one of those tragedies, I mean, isn't that worth it? I mean, I think that's the value of communicating.
Well, yeah,
it can make a real difference.
You can't measure that,
right?
You don't know if that saved a kid because
you don't know what you don't know,
right? Because thank God the tragedy did not occur.
The endangered missing advisory. So this is something that we started. A lot of states have like silver alerts, blue alerts, things like that. The EMAs that we started maybe 6 years ago. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but something like 25 of those cases have been the person has been found, and a lot of times it's someone elderly with dementia, has been found because someone saw the post on social media. I mean, that's 25 cases where a family member was returned home safely because of social media communications and because the public bought into it and said, I can make a difference here just because I saw that. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Wow. Whether it's, missing person cases, whether it's weather related stuff, tornadoes, fires that we've had.
Well, not getting stuck in traffic because there's a huge crash on the interstate and not having to sit there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's huge too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's it can be measured in ways, but there are several other ways that we'll never know because it's the news stories that are never news stories because something's prevented.
Yeah. I mean, if everyone gets home safe at the end of the day, that's a victory, right?
Yeah.
So whatever we can do to help that, that's what I'm going for.
What's Robert Peel say? It's not the measurement of the crime you solve, it's the absence of crime.
Yes.
That's the success.
And not just the byproduct of us dealing with it. So, what do you, just before we let you go, what does the future look like over at at your shop? What projects do you have on the horizon?
Okay, so just starting this weekend, Memorial Day weekend.
Yep.
We're going to take our social media followers on a tour of Nebraska this summer.
Wow.
That's one of the things that I think people with the patrol, they perceive I-80, right?
Yep.
I mean, we just got troopers lined up on I-80 on Memorial Day weekend. Yes, there are troopers on I-80 on Memorial Day weekend, but they're all over the state. We're present in local communities across the state. So I want to show off some of the towns where our troopers live, where they patrol throughout the summer. So we're going to take people on a tour of Nebraska. A lot of people will vacation across Nebraska, but they probably won't. They probably have not heard of some of the communities that we're going to show them this summer. So that's just one of the things we're doing. We're really close to our class graduating, which is coming up in a couple weeks. 3 weeks from today, they graduate. So we're in the process of introducing them to the public with our Meet the Recruits videos that we've done for the last, this is Camp 6-9. So this is the 11th class that we've done Meet the Recruits videos for, where this is one of those times where I interview them out at camp and get them in front of a camera and let them talk about themselves and why they want to do it. And so we're just showing off a little bit of their training, that they're human, that they're people, that they come from all different backgrounds, that they're all different ages. I mean, we've got 21-year-olds going through camp, and we've had 47-year-olds go through camp in the last 6 or 7 years. So that's one thing that we're doing. And I mean, who knows? Like, just that's one cool thing about the patrol, is that anything could happen on any given day.
No 2 days are the same.
No 2 days are the same. And we've got a whole team of people out there who want to tell the story.
I love that, you're making them look human, because I think a lot of times the public looks at us kind of like robots, and putting that human perspective on there, I think, is so important, because we haven't done that well. I've been doing this 31 years now, and I bet for the first 20, 25, we kind of stunk at that. And I think that's so good that you guys are doing that, because we're trying to do that too.
If people aren't already following you on social media and want to partake in the Tour de Nebraska this summer, where can people follow you at?
At NE State Patrol.
At NE State Patrol.
All platforms. Same thing.
Okay. Awesome. Cody Thomas, appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, this was fun.
You guys do this every week?
We try to.
Try.
Can I come every week?
Sure.
This gets me back into the radio mood.
You're welcome anytime. I will take all of the help that I can get. So
it's more that he's trying to help us, and we're kind of hard to work with.
Well, hope you have a safe summer. Thanks for all that you do for Nebraska State Patrol, but really for all of us, because I think you were exactly spot on when you said that you rise all the boats when you highlight all of the good things that law enforcement's doing across the state of Nebraska. So just really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Cody.
That is all the time that we have for today's episode of the 902 podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Big thanks to Cody Thomas and the Nebraska State Patrol for joining us today and talking about all things law enforcement communication and a lot of the why behind why we communicate in law enforcement. If you have questions about career opportunities at the Nebraska State Patrol, be sure to check them out at nebraskatroopers.com. If you have questions about employment opportunities at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, you can find us at joinlso.com. We have information there on both sworn and non-sworn careers at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. Be sure to subscribe to the 902 podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts to catch all of our episodes, and reach out to us on social media at LSO Nebraska on all platforms. You can also shoot us an email, lso@lancaster.ne.gov. Hope to catch you on the next episode of the 902 podcast. Thanks for listening.